I'm excited about today's live show because we're going to talk about a very awesome topic, which is we're going to talk about cults. Yay! And I think before I start, I should probably have a little bit of this. Okay, here we go. And I think that you might want some too. Look at that. Delicious. So I'm going to have some Kool-Aid. And this is probably going to be the last time that you hear me refer to drinking the Kool-Aid. It's something that people joke about a lot, like they get excited about things and they're like, oh, I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank the Kool-Aid of having an iPhone, or, I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm in the gratitude training. It's actually a really offensive joke, seeing that it stems back to Jim Jones. And when he actually gave Flavor Aid and killed, I think, 90-something people and suicide too, including infants and children. And he was part of a destructive cult called People's Temple. And so the joke of drinking the Kool-Aid is not really a joke, and it's actually very offensive. So I am going to drink the Kool-Aid right now, and it's the last time you see me refer to that joke, because I actually don't think it's funny. And it worked. It's actually really good. So with that said, I think a lot of people don't really look at what the word cult really means. And it's very confusing, because it's got a lot of meanings. In fact, usually you can tell more about the person using the word cult and their belief system than who they're actually defining as a cult or who they're talking about. In the gratitude trainings, we have, there's been a few conversations coming up about, like, is gratitude a cult? I know sometimes when you try to enroll someone in the training, they go online and they might find stuff on it. And it's actually, again, it's very interesting because it's a very offensive term to use, because when you use it in that respect, you're actually referring to destructive cults most of the time. Specifically, if you're like, I don't want to do that, that's a cult. Destructive cults are very scary. And we're going to actually talk about the differences between, like, a destructive cult versus, or a cult versus a community today. And we're going to talk about how they are distinct from each other, and also how in some cases they're actually similar. So I actually say, if a cult is, buying an iPhone and being part of the cult of Apple, then I'm definitely sold. I am part of the cult of Apple. I'm part of the cult of Facebook. I'm part of a lot of cults in that respect. And in that respect, I am part of the cult of the gratitude training. There's actually a definition of cult and a definition of community, one that's distinct, and then there's one that's actually the same. So the distinct version is that a community is a social, religious, or occupational, or any other group that shares a common characteristic of interest, and they perceive themselves as distinct in some respect from the larger society within which it exists. So in that case, I think gratitude training is a community, Apple is a community, Facebook is a huge community. A cult, on the other hand, in this distinct description, is a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. Or it could be a small religious group that's not part of a larger and more accepted religion, and that has beliefs that are regarded by many people as extreme or dangerous, or exclusive. So that's the two kind of separate definitions of cult and community. But there's also a definition that falls for both of them. And that is the first one. Let me actually put it up. There we go. A great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work, piece of work, which could be a movie, the cult movies we talk about, or a group of people coming together. Like, that's simple. And most of the time for a cause or for something, there's a reason they come together. Like, they come together, actually, like just having people over to watch a a football game, people coming together with a devotion to a team, can actually be described in this definition as either cult or community. Now, what is really the difference then between a community and what I'm going to call a destructive cult? And I think it's important that we look at this, because what you're going to find after listening to this session today is that a lot of people, including myself, partake in a cult consciousness a lot. I mean, even like when we're watching even the political environment going on right now, there's a lot of what you're going to see when I describe cult. There's a lot of those things happening within our political environment, which I call cult consciousness. We're also going to look at community consciousness and what the difference is. If you see here, you got community on one side and you got cult on the other side. So one of the things that we're going to start with here is a community actually fosters relationship. Okay, so community fosters relationship. Now, what does that mean? It means basically that a community's fundamental function is to foster better relationships, specifically those closest to us, like our families. It teaches us to be a better brother, a better sister, a better mother, a better father, a better friend, a better lover, husband, wife, whatever. It actually fosters relationships. Now, as far as a cult goes, it actually ruins relationships. A destructive cult actually ruins relationships. It cuts you off from your friends and your family. It creates conflicts. It creates disagreements, arguments. And so basically what happens is when your family doesn't agree with your cult, they become your enemy. And then you try to force your ideology on your family. So a lot of times, actually, an organization or or a leader or a political environment might not actually have the cult mentality. However, the people within it sometimes may actually interpret it in a certain way and act out cultish consciousness. And here's a perfect example. You might have someone that have actually taken the gratitude training, and they go home to their family and they want to enroll them in the training because it's one of the most powerful things ever, and the family's not interested. And then you keep pressing and pressing and pressing because you actually on some level want to force something that it might be great for them, but if they're a no, they're a no. And we get to respect each other, each other's no. Now, so in that case, a family could be, you're part of a cult, you're trying to force something on me, and it ruins the relationship. Now, back to community, fostering relationship would be, being in communication with people and being intimate, connected, and all these things to create a better relationship. And in some cases, someone might then go, you know what, I want to do this training because the way you're showing up is amazing, and we have intimacy, and we have all these things now. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is a community is actually a context of love and support. Okay, so community is a context of love and support. I'm going to just put this on. I don't have Quack here to support me today, so I'm having to click on things and talk at the same time. So a community in a community, we actually pick each other up. There's encouragement, present, inspiration, understanding, all of those things. And there's a trust that's built when you're being open and accepting and loving. So there's a context of love and support in a community. In a cult, however, there's a context. And when I say context, I mean environment. Okay. So there's an environment of fear, guilt, and anger. Right. So there's negative emotions involved in a destructive cult. So basically, in a destructive cult, they need to make you angry to stay in the cult, because the anger actually keeps the members united. And I'm telling you right now, that's what I'm seeing on both major political parties right now. It's like this, it actually keeps them together more to be angry, and the anger keeps them united, And if you actually choose to change it, they'll shame and guilt you to stay in that organization or cult or political party, whatever it is. And that's cultish mentality, shaming and guilting you for wanting to explore something different. Okay. The other thing about community is in a community, you can find diversity. Okay, and that's what I love about the United States. There's such an amazing diversity in the United States, and I'm from Sweden. I'm so honored to be welcome in this country to create and do what I do here. So in a community, everyone is welcome, and we actually appreciate diversity. Okay, and the fact that you're different is actually a good thing because it actually adds to the community. It becomes richer. Okay. Now, uniformity is present in a cult. It basically demands that everyone be exactly the same. They should talk the same, dress the same, act the same, all the same. In a community, mistakes are okay. Mistakes are actually welcome in the community. We say, look, you made a mistake. Let's help you. Let's get you back on your feet. You know, you got this. We're going to support you. We travel together and we literally pick you up when you fall. Mistakes are totally okay in a community. Whereas in a cult, mistakes are not okay. Sometimes when you make mistakes in a cult, in a destructive cult, you're actually out. You're kicked out. You're done. So it's not okay to make mistakes. In a community, what's present is critical thinking. And that's the thing. The gratitude training is actually a leadership training that fosters critical thinking so that you can decide for yourself what you believe in, what your vision is, what you're committed to, get to know yourself better, all of that. That's coming from critical thinking. Okay. So a community is actually an environment for people to support each other to understand themselves better. Okay. You can actually freely ask questions in the community without being criticized or judged. Okay. Now, in a cult, there's actually something that we call dictated thinking. So in a cult, you're actually basically told what to think. So this is it. This is how we believe. This is what we believe. This is the best thing that there is. And everything else is bad and wrong. And how dare you think anything else? You should be ashamed of yourself. Basically, it's a mentality of just shut up and follow. That's what a cult mentality has. The next one is a community is open and welcoming. Okay. So a community actually has its doors open all the time. And there's cooperation, and there could actually be cooperation between other communities. And we actually want to go out into the world and get to know our neighbors and get to know our other ideologies and people and countries and coexist in a loving way, regardless of differences. So it's got this win-win mentality in the community. Okay, the community actually wants to be known to the world. We're here to serve the world. We're here to serve others. And the communities accept people and want to be known. Whereas a cult is closed and aggressive and hates outside communication. Okay. A cult actually sees themselves against the rest of the world. It's like, I'm at war with everyone else. Again, I'm going to bring up the political environment. That's what I keep seeing on the news. It's like me against everyone else. Okay. And I'm talking about all of politics right now that's happening. So in a cult, cults actually want to be isolated and cut out from the world and in a box. So basically a cult says the only way that you're going to stay safe is if you follow us. And don't listen to that speaker. Don't listen to that person. Don't go to that convention. Don't take that workshop. You're going to get lost. So we're going to keep you safe. And that's the way cults actually attack, they attack anything outside of them that's different. Okay. And they'd rather be closed and separated away from the world. Now, last one I have right here is transformative organic practices versus static and fixed practices. Okay. Now, transformative organic practice. So in a community, if let's say that there's a meditation community and we've been doing this meditation for 20 years, and then someone says, listen, I don't think this is working anymore, and here's why. A community will actually listen, and if it makes sense, they will actually adapt and change and transform any practices that doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, we are organic beings. We are fluid. We transform all the time. Like, the consciousness of today is completely different than even, I'm going to say, even yesterday, So in a community, it's actually welcome to come up with ideas of change and ideas to make things better. Whereas in a cult, it's actually very static and fixed. So they have habits and practices usually that have been going on forever, and you do not question them. Like, you can't even question them or come up with any suggestions for change. It's more like, well, this is how it is, and this is how we're going to do it, and that's it. No questions. Okay? And they might not even know why they're doing it anymore. It's just almost on automatic. Now, the thing is about all this is that we have to be really discerning, because it's very common that we think we may be part of a community, but then we start displaying cult mentality in actions. And what I mean by cult mentality is, for instance, let's say that you live in a pretty nice neighborhood, but maybe you don't have as much money as the people, your neighbors, okay? And then the new iPhone comes out. You got your neighbors over, and everybody's gotten the new iPhone. And you actually go, and you really cannot afford the new iPhone. Like, you can't afford it. But you then go take a little small business loan or a little loan, and you actually go get it. That is actually cultish mentality. It's conformity, right? We do things or feel pressure to do things, or we're not going to be liked or accepted if we don't do it. That is displaying cult mentality. Now, it's important that we continue to foster community, because community actually says, like, everyone's welcome. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a new iPhone or not. Like, in fact, the community would probably support the person not to get an iPhone because they don't have the budget right now, or they come together and raise the money so that they can have an iPhone. There's so many different ways that a community works together. When you start, let's say that you have principles that you live by that are very important. So my principles are, integrity, responsibility, gratitude, service, and community. And when I start setting those principles aside to conform to something, I'm actually stepping into cult mentality. It's important that you stand by your personal principles, okay? And not change who you are to fit in or be part of, If we look at just the business environment too, a lot of times competition, judgment, antagonism, all of that is cult mentality. So we actually all have it. And we all are part of, actually at the gratitude training, we actually call that the drift. It's like drifty thinking. It's not critical thinking. It's just conformity. It's coming from fear, judgment, and all of that. And the drift is actually the mainstream of our nation. And I see it on TV every day. It's we try to fit in, and we come from the survival context. I've talked about that on other shows. If you want to, find that, you can find that. But it's important that we start discern where we're coming from. Are we coming from our principles? Are we coming from love? Are we accepting? Are we loving? And move from there, And I actually talked about this in one of my webinars, and someone had a question, which was, what do I do when, if I'm supposed to be so open and loving and accepting to everyone? What if it's someone out there that's like displaying really dangerous behaviors, or someone that I really can't love? And what I say to that is, you can absolutely love everyone, first of all. Now, you might not like certain behaviors that they are expressing right now, and that's totally okay. So if you don't like certain expressions that they are doing or being, then you can choose, like, I love you, but not right now. Like, I'm not going to invite you into the inner rooms of my house if you're like a serial killer. But can I at the same time extend compassion and love, and knowing that guy was not born a serial killer? Absolutely. And can I hold space that the man or woman transforms? And if they do, and when they do, can I open my house and let them in? Absolutely. So that's what community fosters. So I want everyone to just be really aware of where you're coming from in all actions and ways and whatever we're doing in life, because it's important that we stand by our own principles. And so I did talk about, I put a little bit, is gratitude a cult? And I love that it actually has the word gratitude. Is gratitude a cult? Yeah, well, gratitude is, if I look at the description that says great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work, I am definitely devoted to the work of gratitude and what it creates for people in the world. And I can understand when people feel threatened. And here's why. Let's say that you're married to a guy who is a workaholic, pretty disconnected, always on the phone, whatever. Some things that, you maybe would rather see some other things. And then this guy, your husband, ends up going to a gratitude training and comes back in 4 days. And now demands intimacy, connection, want to spend more time with the kids, all these things. That's such an incredibly drastic change that I can see how that could be very threatening. And I could see how someone would be like, oh my God, like, you're brainwashed. You know what I mean? And all I can say is that is the power of the trainings, because people actually get in touch with who they really are and what is important to them. And being a workaholic might not be that important once you start seeing, the things that really are for yourself. And maybe for someone could also come out and never worked and come back at 4 days later and be like, I want to work all the time. And that might be their passion. So it's not about what and how people come out. It's more like what's important to them, and then applying that and extending it into the world. The reason I started gratitude training is because I want to create world peace. Because I literally believe that even if the distinctions of the gratitude trainings were present right now in our political environment, we would see a completely different following. We would see completely different leaders. We would see completely different debates. That's my goal. That's what I want to see. And I will continue until I see that. And I'm committed to having that in my lifetime, our lifetime. So we better get going. Thank you all for commenting, and it's certainly been an honor to be here with you in this way. So is gratitude a cult? Based on today, you decide. That's it. Because yes, it's a cult. And no, it's not a destructive cult. It's a cult in the sense of Bikram yoga and Facebook and Starbucks and all the things that we get really excited about, and you really want to ask yourself, is it something that supports the greater good? Is it something that supports human beings? Is it something that supports us to be healthier and more awake? If so, call it what you want. I'm in. That's really my point. When does the community swing to cult consciousness? This is a great question, Susan. When does the community swing to cult consciousness? So here's what happens. There are many communities today that have little cliques within them that actually could be described as cults. It happens. I mean, you could even look at like, Miami Dolphins fans, so like the full community is like, we love this team, we're together, we clap together, we want them to win. But then there might be cliques that are like, that become like the fanatics, or if you like any other team, you're wrong. And, like you see all the soccer games in England where they actually start hurting each other at the games. So there are, like I said, sometimes the people in a community can create that kind of cult-like mentality. And all we can do is, keep staying awake to it and keep nudging people and supporting them in not going into that kind of fear-based or destructive thinking, and just, again, and accept them for having their opinions. It's okay. I'm fine if not everyone in the world loves the gratitude training. However, I would invite people to see for themselves, and not judge prior to even experiencing it, because that doesn't work anywhere. You can't say I hate that job and you've never been in that job. You know what I mean? So I ask that you come see for yourself. How do you distinguish a good cult and a bad cult to people who are very scared? Well, if they're already scared, they're probably already in a cult, because cult-based thinking. So that's the drift. Cult-based thinking is fear. It's constant fear-based. So I'm going to ask you a question. How do you distinguish a good cult and a bad cult? I would just explain it like people coming together for a good cause or to love something. And if you want to call that cult, then so be it. That would be, quote unquote, a good cult. A destructive cult, or what you call is a bad cult, is when some people are actually hurt, like they're hurting each other, and I'm talking like mass suicide, or they're forcing their ideology on them, or they're saying that you can't date that person because that person is not part of my religion. That's not a community. So I would just have them ask the question, what is it for? What is this community, or what is this cult for? And if it's for something that you can get behind, then call it what you want and be part of it. If you can't get behind it because you see things that are harmful, then don't get behind it. Nicholas Corona, look at it as a fraternity, sorority. Yeah, that could actually be a good cult and a bad cult, because sometimes they are conforming and forced and they are feeling pressured, and sometimes they're actually out there creating amazing things as a fraternity or as a sorority. So you know what, it's at the end of the day, just look at what it's for, and then make your choices, and honor other people's choices too. I think that is one of the most important things too. So thank you all so much for being part of this today. I love each and every one of you, and love you, Danny Pesta. I see that. So have an amazing, amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you next week at noon.